I've put it in miles here because I was able to find the conversion rate for you, but it's about over 3,000 kilometres or 1,800 miles long. There are over 3,000 reefs that make up the Great Barrier Reef. The Great Barrier Reef is not a solid reef. It's made up of lots of small reefs, islands, coral cays, and it has just this huge extension. There's over 900 islands, both coral cays and mainland islands, that make up the Great Barrier Reef. And it was World Heritage listed in 1981 because of its values. It's the largest coral reef system in the world, and it extends over 340,000 kilometres. Now, just giving you some statistics here to make it comparable to what you might understand. It's larger than the Great Wall of China, the whole nation of New Zealand, which of course is quite small anyway when Australians love New Zealanders. It's bigger than the UK and Ireland put together. It's bigger than the state of New Mexico. It's equal in size to Japan. It's a third larger than Wyoming. I was doing a lot of work on this yesterday afternoon, trying to convert all this. And it's approximately half the size of Texas. So I don't know if that puts it into any context for you, but basically it's in a very, very large area, but it's a very unique and very dynamic system. And of course, because most of it is underwater, it has special issues. It's the only living thing on Earth that is actually available from outer space. And that's one thing that people forget about the Barrier Reef. They think it's just made up of things that are limestone based, but of course it's made up of it's a living entity. It's made up of corals and plants and animals. So it's actually a completely living ecosystem, which is very dynamic and which is very susceptible to change. Just to give you an idea, again, just some lists of kinds of animals and things, and these are only a few, but we have over 1,600 species of fish, 3,000 species of mollusks, and the list goes on. It's a very, very big system. It's very susceptible to human interference, and we think potentially very susceptible to climate change. And we've seen quite a lot of change already in the past, probably 20 years, in the way that the reef has changed. I say my talk is very short, making up for some of the others. The main threats to the Barrier Reef: direct human impacts from tourism, farming, fishing, pollution, and coastal development, and indirect from climate change, even though it's still human-oriented. Tourism is, I guess the Great Barrier Reef is one of those things that's on most people's bucket list. If you've never been to Australia and you've never seen it, there are some places in the world that people want to go to. They want to go to the Great Barrier Reef, they want to go to the Galapagos, they probably want to see Kruger National Park and all its animals. And it's one of those places that has got a very high volume tourism. The Great Barrier Reef has over 1,500 vessels that operate on the reef, and there's over 800, probably closer to 900 tour operations. And most of those are concentrated in particular areas. The Southern Barrier Reef, where Lady Elliot is fairly spartan. And there's only 3 coral cays on the whole of the Barrier Reef that have resorts on them. So there's Lady Elliot, Heron Island, and then Green Island in the north. And there's, depending on the geology of the Barrier Reef, the populations are concentrated, the populations of tourists are concentrated. So it's a very high tourism area. We're worried about the impact of main human threat from tourism being two-way: overuse or underuse. Now I know that sounds like a bit of a contradiction in terms. Overuse from the number of visitors, because as soon as people go to the Barrier Reef, what's the first thing you want to do? You want to get in the water, you want to snorkel, you want to see everything that's under the water. People damage the reef. No matter how good a snorkeler or a diver you are, you will probably stand on some coral somewhere, or you will do some damage. The boats anchoring do damage because of some places have special anchor points, other places don't. So there's anchor damage. There's damage just from boat pollution itself, from diesel leaking from bilges. They've now brought in legislation where you can't actually pump your toilet out anymore, even for private boats. But that's only been in the last couple of years. So there's quite a huge impact from tourism, mainly the visitation aspect. So many people. However, one of the problems that we see in the future is if the physical quality of the reef changes from other things. So if coral keeps bleaching, or you can't see a particular animal, or there's so much damage to particular areas that certain fish have left, or other animals don't come, then there's going to be an underuse by tourism. And one of the things that we have and we're concerned about, what about if it's maybe not even, if it's not real, but it's people's perception of how the Great Barrier Reef is going to change over time because of climate change or other issues. People will stop coming, the money stops coming, the communities around the reef from the mainland, the tour operators, the management agencies rely on the tourist dollar. All that will change, and all that will have a significant impact. And it may be it may be a perceived change. Fishing certainly has a big impact on the Barrier Reef, and the Barrier Reef is managed by the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority. It's a multi-use national park, a marine park, which means that there are zones that are set aside for fishing, for collecting shells, just purely for there's preservation zones. There's areas where you can have tourists, or you can troll through you can have commercial trolling and fishing. But there's something for everybody there. However, trawling is one of the biggest commercial fishing industries in Queensland, and it does have a significant impact on the reef from nets and from obviously damage that does. In addition, recreational fishing can at times have a significant impact on the reefs. The reef is known for its quality of fish and the kind of fish, and people go to certain areas. You can spear fish on the reef as well. So a lot of times reefs get closed off from time to time to try and restock. Whether that's real or perceived, again, there's a little illegal fishing goes on. So fishing can have a huge impact. Farming is probably one of our greatest threats, in that all the farming that goes on the mainland, because the Barrier Reef is so close in places to the mainland, up to 15 kilometres, which is fairly close. The area where the reef is in the northern part of Queensland, there's a lot of sugarcane production on the mainland. There's lots of pesticides, there's a lot of pollution, there's lots of fertilisers, lots of clearing of land. The mangrove areas along the coast have been cleared a lot of times, or decimated, and those are nursery areas for our fish and for other animals. So there's a lot of farming issues that actually impact. So anything that runs off the mainland goes straight out onto the reef. Now we've had, you may have read about it over recent months, we've had huge floods in Queensland, especially this year and last year. And every time there's a flood on the mainland, everything that's there gets washed out to sea, and gets washed out basically to the Barrier Reef. So sometimes you'll get these huge plumes of siltation that's carrying all sorts of chemicals and pollutants out onto the reef. Any coastal development where there's land clearing, and again pollution, human impact, is all dramatically affecting the water quality of the reef and the physical structure of it. The main issues that we are concerned about, obviously from climate change, specifically a rising sea level, as Bill said. If you have a look at this top picture here, and this one here, the coral cays, like coral cays anywhere in the world, they're not very high above sea level. I lived on Heron Island, which is one of the coral cays on the Barrier Reef, for a number of years, and the highest point on the island was about 6 feet above sea level. So when you have huge storms, you have huge waves coming through, it impacts significantly on the island. So any rise in sea level will potentially decimate these coral cays. Coral is an air-breathing animal, so even though it's underwater, a lot of the time it breathes air. They come to the surface, sorry, it's not an air-breathing animal. It's cut off when it comes to the surface, but it can only live at certain depths. So what happens is, as your sea level will rise, we will start to find that these animals are not getting enough light, which will change the way they breed and live. Rising water temperature has impacted severely over the last 20 years on coral, with coral bleaching. which is because the corals have a plant that lives within their cells called a zooxanthellae, which is a little plant that helps them synthesize. The rising temperature, a lot of these corals have forced the plant out of the cells of the animal, and they bleach. The coral goes white. And that has impacted then on obviously how other animals interact with those below the surface. And the other problem we have on the reef, of course, will be acidification, which is common in most areas where we've got any change in the water profile. So the barrier reef, a very fragile environment, and an environment that has changed significantly in the last 20 years already. You can go to areas which 20 years ago were quite dense in corals, quite dense in their fish populations, and you go back to them today. I've seen the change because I've been working in these areas for over probably nearly 25 years now, and the fish are gone. They're completely disappeared from certain areas. The corals, the whole profile of a reef edge on some of these coral cays has completely changed. Some of that is through bleaching, some of it is through changing through storms, breaking the coral off in different areas. The whole profiles can change very, very quickly. As Bill said, as the sand moves north, Lady Elliot is the southernmost tip of the Great Barrier Reef. So as sand from Fraser Island moves north, that is going to impact on the coral because of the clarity of the water. So that there will be impacts from that right up through certain parts of the Barrier Reef. And as siltation gets washed out of the rivers along the mainland, that again affects the corals and the reef itself. And I just want to leave you with some relatives of Kevin, the kangaroo. University is, we're only a small university. Our student population is about 8,000, so not that much different from Wyoming. We do have a commitment to Fraser Island and to working on these areas which are very close to us. But again, we are a small university, and there's so much work that just isn't being done across the Barrier Reef or across Fraser Island or some of the areas of Queensland. Thank you.